Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, Series 2000. This week, I'm excited to visit Ghost in the Mirror. Well, we're finally at the end of Series 2000. I was hopeful Stein would go out on a high note, and I think he pulled it off for the most part. Ghost in the Mirror at first feels like a bit of a retread of Let's Get Invisible, with some evil reflections running around, until Stein decides to really turn this on its head with some full-on monsters, and an imaginative, albeit nonsense mirror world. It's definitely worth checking out if you haven't yet. This 2000 cover is pretty great. I've been a sucker for other mirrored dimensions ever since seeing that weird live-action Alice in Wonderland show that was on the Disney Channel in the early 90s.
Give you a little walk will help me think of a few more.
This color palette is successfully eerie, and I love the creepy outstretched hand emerging from the mirror. It definitely caught my attention when I first saw it. Our front take says, "Look, but don't scream," which is a play on look, but don't touch. But let's check out the back of this book. I stood in front of my new mirror and gazed at my reflection. The glass was clean and smooth and perfect. The reflection was incredibly bright, almost brighter and clearer than my room. A chill ran down my back. Fred was staring over my shoulder. "What's wrong?" I asked. "The mirror," he said softly. "I saw something moving in there." Okay, let's start this summary. The book opens with an introduction to Jason, and he is a self-described basic wimp, not to be confused with the basic bitch. His older sister Claudia delights in scaring Jason, even if she finds him borderline pathetic because of how easy it is. In defense of Jason, Claudia is a bit demented herself and spends more time than most siblings terrorizing her younger brother, so there's a reason he's so jumpy. One time, she even found a dead rat in the garage, strung it up on a fishing pole, and scared Jason with it, so she's definitely willing to go the extra mile for a scare. This girl also put spaghetti in Jason's bed, which managed to scare him. I personally wouldn't find that scary, nor would I immediately think of snakes. However, I would find it gross and be pissed. We learn Jason shares a trait with our last protagonist in a scary mirror book, and is very preoccupied with his hair. He can't pass a mirror without looking at it and tidying up a bit. We also learn the family has a fluffy little brown dog named Buzzy, which is a great name for a dog. For some reason, we then jump to 2 weeks later, and Jason is playing basketball with his best friend Fred. His parents interrupt their game to announce a surprise. They got him some bedroom furniture from a yard sale. This is important because Claudia was teasing him earlier in the story for still having lots of his little kid bedroom furniture. Jason admires the old antique dresser that's a little banged up with some drawers that are jammed shut, but what he really likes is the giant full-length mirror. He gazes into the mirror and can't get past how clear it is. He also starts to feel unsettled because the longer he looks into the mirror, the harder it is to look away, almost like this mirror is trying to pull him into it. Later that night, Fred comes over, and Jason shows off his new furniture. Fred is about as excited to look at antique furniture as you'd expect most 12-year-olds to be, and they quickly shift to playing video games. We get a lot of detailed video game action, mostly to establish Fred is just as terrible at sports video games as he is at sports in real life. While playing virtual hockey, Fred suddenly stops playing and insists he saw something moving inside the mirror. Both kids are kinda creeped out, and then Fred heads on home. When Jason returns to his room, he finds an old yellowed piece of paper at the foot of the mirror that reads, "Beware, bring this into your house and you bring death." Jason reads the note a few more times, even though the message is pretty clear to me. Jason peeks around the mirror, trying to figure out where the note could have come from, when he remembers the existence of Claudia, and immediately assumes it has to be her trying to scare him. Claudia denies writing the note, but still manages to scare Jason with a simple, "Watch out, there's a ghost behind you" moment. Jason kinda believes Claudia didn't write the note, considering she's generally very proud of her pranks, so he's left uneasy about the whole situation. The next day, Fred and Jason are playing soccer in the front yard when they suddenly hear Buzzy going nuts inside the house. Jason races inside and finds Buzzy barking frantically at the mirror. He goes to pick up Buzzy, but the little dog keeps lunging at the mirror. This leaves Jason wondering if something really is inside of this mirror. At dinner, he tries to bring up his concerns around the mirror, but they are easily dismissed because Jason is already an established fraidy cat. Claudia goes on to say how she felt inspired by the mirror and wrote a whole ghost story about it in English class that day. In her story, a girl dies and haunts the mirror, leaving it at night to terrorize the house and eventually possess a boy. This does not help Jason's current situation and freaks him out even more. The parents try to change subjects and go to toast to the dad's new job when they hear strange animal growls up in Jason's room. They hurry up the stairs and find Buzzy in front of the mirror, making sounds he's never made before. Jason thinks that Buzzy looks different, but can't pinpoint why. He gets down to pick up Buzzy and notices that Buzzy has strange, cold, dark eyes, but before he can investigate much further, Buzzy quickly lunges for Jason's throat and is actually fairly violent. I uttered a choked scream and fell onto my back. I struggled to grab the dog, to pull him off of me, but grunting and growling, Buzzy clamped his teeth onto my throat and clawed at my face with his front paws. Off, boy, off! I felt warm blood run down my neck, pain shot down my throat and chest. The dog snapped at my ear, raked a sharp paw down the side of my face. Help me, somebody, I screamed. I grabbed Buzzy around the middle and pulled. He snapped his jaw, snapped so viciously, so furiously. My face throbbed with pain. Help me! The dad is eventually able to pry Buzzy off of Jason's throat and carries him away, leaving Jason to clean the blood off himself in the bathroom. He asks his mom if he should be worried about rabies, and she's just like, nah, rabid dogs foam at the mouth. Which doesn't sound like sound advice to me. Rabies is something you don't want to fuck around with. Fred is over again that night because I think this kid lives with them part-time at this rate, and they're once again playing video games. Fred wanders over to the mirror and remarks how looking into this mirror is almost somehow clearer than real life. He then starts screaming, and Jason races over to see what all the commotion is about, and starts screaming himself when he spots Buzzy. In the reflection of the mirror, Jason can see Buzzy sitting meekly between Fred and himself, but when he looks down, Buzzy is nowhere to be found. They race to get Claudia, but by the time she arrives in the room, Reflection Buzzy is already gone. Claudia's like, nice try, you can't scare me, and leaves the room. Fred tries to convince himself that they both didn't see anything after all. Jason inspects the mirror closely, and is surprised that it's warm to the touch. He leaves Fred alone in the room briefly to get a snack, and when he returns, Fred is no longer there. Jason searches the house and even calls Fred's number to see if he went home, but still can't locate Fred. He eventually gives up and goes to lay on his bed when he hears a cough from inside the closet. The door opens and Jason is promptly attacked by some sort of hideous creature, which ends up being Claudia in a mask, of course. Just getting a scare in before bed. Jason eventually goes to bed after staring at the mirror for a bit more. While he's trying to fall asleep, he can still hear Buzzy barking furiously out in the garage, but realizes he can also hear a soft whimpering, like Buzzy is scared of something coming from inside the mirror. We hop to the next day in gym class, and Jason spots Fred across the room. He asks Fred where he went last night, and at first Fred seems confused. He eventually is just like, oh, I had things to do, and walks away from Jason. They head outside to play soccer, and Fred ends up dominating the game by playing aggressively. This is extra notable because Fred is usually in an uncoordinated mess. Jason comments that it's like he was totally possessed, and this sets Fred off. He's like, don't ever say that about me again, and tackles Jason to the ground and starts smashing his face in. 2 teachers have to pull Fred off of Jason, and he's sent to the nurse's office bruised and bloody. Fred gets suspended, and Jason gets sent home early so he can rest up from his beatdown. He enters the house and is creeped out since he's not used to being home alone. He decides to grab a book from his room and relax on the couch, but while grabbing the book, he sees movement inside the mirror from the corner of his eye. He stares from across the room as he watches shadows swirl inside the mirror and eventually form the outline of Buzzy and what he thinks is Fred. He then watches as the shadows swirl away, and he's left trembling and thinking, what the fuck is up with this mirror? The story cuts to later that night, and Jason is trying his best to fall asleep with this evil-ass mirror right across from him. He wants to sleep in the living room, but he doesn't want his family to know he's afraid. I'd be perfectly okay with everybody knowing I want nothing to do with this demon mirror at this point. Jason also mentions that Buzzy is still acting psychotic in the garage, and that his parents are worried they're gonna have to get rid of him, since the neighbors are starting to complain about all the barking. It's now 15 minutes after midnight, and Jason still can't sleep. He thinks he hears breathing coming from his closet, so he hops up to startle Claudia before she can startle him, only to realize the ragged breathing is coming from inside the mirror. We then spend a chapter as Jason listens to the breathing and slowly turns to face the mirror, as Stein tries his best to build up some suspense. I would say he's been fairly successful with this one so far, but we still have half a book to go. Jason flicks on the light and is shocked to see that although the room is now bright, the mirror is a solid reflective black. The blackness then forms into a gray mist, which eventually swirls into a figure resembling Fred. The misty Fred has dead gray eyes instead of his usual bright blue ones, and his mouth is hanging open as he bangs his hand silently against the glass. This is some solidly creepy imagery, with this dead-looking kid trapped inside the mirror begging to be let out. Jason approaches the mirror, which is a terrible decision because suddenly the glass barrier vanishes, and Fred latches onto Jason's arm and begins tugging him into the mirror with his cold, dead hands. Dead Fred has surprising strength, and Jason is unable to break free of his grasp. Jason can feel the blackness of the mirror filling the room as he's pulled into the mirror, when he suddenly just blacks out. He opens his eyes and finds himself on the floor of his bedroom. He briefly wonders if this was all an intense dream, but looks at his wrists and can see red marks from dead Fred pulling on him. He glances at the mirror and can see it's still a reflective black. He decides to go get his parents when the mirror suddenly starts to swirl with gray mist again, and shit gets even weirder. Another gray cloud formed, another misty figure looming forward from the deep blackness. The gray mist swirled like a tornado of smoke, tumbling over itself, pulsing, bubbling. A head formed on a human body, covered in gray, covered like a cocoon. Then, the smoke drifted away and I could see the figure's face clearly. So clearly. My mouth dropped open, but no sound came out, and I stared at the face in horror. My face. My face inside the glass, staring back at me with such sad, dark eyes. I took a staggering step back from the mirror, nearly tripped over my own bare feet. No, I whispered. I pressed my hands against my cheeks. I couldn't stop my legs from trembling. Who are you? I asked in a tiny, trembling voice. How is this happening? The dark eyes studied me through the glass. The lips moved before the sound reached me. Jason, I am your ghost. No, I screamed. No, you can't be. Yes, I am your ghost. Jason and I are still trying to process how it's possible that his own ghost is in the mirror when Mirror Jason informs him that he died tonight of fright. The actual Jason is very confused, but is mesmerized by the Mirror Jason, who keeps beckoning him to come and join him inside the mirror. Jason is unable to fight this urge and feels himself being lifted off the ground and right into the mirror. As he's floating up into the Mirror Jason grabs him by the shoulders and starts to pull him fully in, until Buzzy's barks snap Jason out of his hypnotized state. He can then hear Fred's voice warning him not to come into the mirror. Jason is able to break free from his reflection's grasp and falls onto the floor of his bedroom and scoots away from the mirror. This pisses his reflection off, and things get real Beetlejuicy. Scrambling to my feet, I raised my eyes to the mirror and saw my ghost, open his mouth in an angry roar. I ordered you to come here, he bellowed. As he screamed, his mouth opened wider. Then it flapped back over his head until it appeared to swallow his whole face. I stared in sickened horror as my face disappeared, and his whole head turned inside out. And I was gaping at the head of a hideous monster. A fat red tongue flopped out from the creature's pale wet skin. A red nose, bulbous with 3 nostrils, flapped loose from its face. The eyes were yellow, the size of tennis balls, and bugged out from deep red sockets. I uttered a moan of horror and shrank back. The creature's body changed slowly, expanding in all directions, turning into a hard purple shell. The arms, my arms, slid into the monster's shiny wet skin, and enormous red claws poked out, like giant crab claws that stretched and clicked as if sharpening themselves. The whole creature glistened with sweat. The yellow tennis ball eyes rolled like fly eyes in a round red face. The crab claws raised themselves up from the purple hard-shelled body, clicking, snapping, and clicking. I watched in stunned horror as my fright changed to anger. You lied, I yelled, shaking my fist at the hideous creature in the mirror. You lied to me. You're not my ghost, you're a monster. The creature's eyes bugged wider. The mouth opened, revealing 2 jagged rows of purple teeth. The fat red tongue snapped from side to side. Then it raised its giant crab claws, held them up, and opened them wide. The mirror seemed to part as the claw shot out into my room and slapped the side of my head, then tightened around my throat. This book is definitely going places I didn't think it would. I like that Jason is dealing with an actual monster versus his own reflection, like in Let's Get Invisible. The monster claw drags Jason by the neck towards the mirror as he frantically tries to grab something to defend himself with, or something to hold on to, but this fails. All he ends up grabbing is a small hand mirror off his dresser. He smashes the mirror against the monster a few times, but it barely even registers these attacks. The mirror ends up slipping and creating a reflection tunnel when the hand mirror comes face to face with the cursed mirror. Jason then watches in horror as dozens of these monsters within the reflection tunnel start to come to life. The original monster is distracted as Jason falls backwards out of the mirror and back into his bedroom. He then watches as all the clawed monsters begin to battle each other inside the mirror. Monsters have their eyes and guts torn out as they shred each other to pieces. Jason eventually turns away from the mirror and calls his parents for help. When they arrive, he tries to show them the cursed mirror, but it just looks like an everyday mirror now. He then tries to jump into the mirror, but bounces right off of it as his parents watch in concerned confusion. They end up dismissing it as an intense nightmare, and Jason is put back to bed. I would still not be sleeping anywhere near that mirror. At breakfast the next morning, Claudia is quick to taunt Jason about the mirror, and his parents offer to remove it if it's stressing him out this much. I thought Jason would be like, no, he needs to figure out how to save Fred and Buzzy, but he says no because he wants to prove to them that he's not crazy and that the mirror really is cursed. Jason is not a very good friend. When he goes to bike to school, he notices a large corner of the garage is missing, like Buzzy managed to bite his way through it. He investigates further and realizes the entire garage has been trashed, and the damage is way too much for just a little dog. Jason bikes to school, and while passing Fred's house, he's horrified to see that the entire house has been trashed, just like the garage was. He goes to investigate further when he spots Fred down the block, lifting an entire car above his head. Jason begs for Fred to set the car down as the people inside the car scream and bang on the windows. He realizes Fred plans on throwing the car directly at him, and Jason can see that Fred has glowing yellow eyes, like he's under some sort of possession. Jason leaves the scene and pedals to school. I guess he just plans on attending like it's a regular day. He's now fully aware that 2 monsters have escaped from the mirror in the form of Buzzy and Fred, and finally acknowledges that he's going to have to rescue the real Buzzy and real Fred from inside the mirror by going into the mirror one more time. The story then jumps to that night, and Jason is ready to go into this mirror. He skips dinner and heads to bed early, where he just sits on his bed and stares at the mirror until it finally starts to cloud over. He can hear Fred calling for help, so Jason takes the plunge into the mirror. He hasn't really said if he has any sort of plan, but I think it's safe to assume there probably isn't much of one. Inside the mirror, everything is wet and cold, so Jason instantly feels heavy from the dampness. He can see nothing but mist all around him, so he walks cautiously forward. This fails though, and suddenly Jason feels like he stepped right off a cliff and falls into nothingness. When he hits the ground, he looks up and is surrounded by dozens of his own reflections. Fred appears from behind along with Buzzy and is thrilled to see Jason. Fred informs him that the creature trapped him in this house of mirrors and he hasn't been able to get out since. Jason can't get a good look at Fred's eyes and wants to see if they're blue or yellow, just in case this is another monster trying to break out into the real world. He decides to fake punch Fred, and when he clumsily dodges it, Jason decides that's good enough proof that it's good old clumsy Fred. They then have to figure out how to get out of this house of mirrors. But this mystery is short-lived because like 2 sentences later, Jason smacks a mirror angrily and the mirror floats up, revealing a path. I guess Fred never tried touching the mirrors these past 3 days. They head up the path that is also lined with mirrors, including the ground. The path grows so steep they can barely make it up before leveling out and revealing a bright, sparkling mirrored tunnel. They spot Jason's room at the end of the tunnel and race towards it happily. Fred comments how it seems to be getting colder and colder and can't stop himself from shivering. When they reach Jason's room, they're met with solid glass and can't manage to break through. Jason then watches helplessly as Claudia enters the room and grabs his Game Boy, completely oblivious to her brother on the other side of the mirror. Jason then remembers the little hand mirror he put in his pocket and tries to smash it against the glass, but this also goes nowhere. Fred's reflection gets caught in the hand mirror, and suddenly there are 5 more Freds sprung into existence. Jason orders these extra Freds to break down the glass, but it's still no use. The extra Freds decide just to walk away into the mist for plot convenience. Then Jason decides to point the hand mirror at the glass, and surprise, this works. Probably should have been the first solution, given that it's the most obvious. The glass begins to sizzle, and eventually a hole big enough forms for them to crawl through. The boys waste no time and hustle out of this mirror with Buzzy, just in time to see the hole seal up behind them. All this mirror magic is kinda dumb, but I would have been fully invested in it as a kid. I still love the endless tunnels 2 mirrors next to each other creates. Fred and Buzzy both take off out of the bedroom because they want nothing to do with this mirror anymore. Jason heads out to find his parents and is stopped when he's suddenly face to face with another Jason. The imposter Jason quickly transforms into the bug-eyed crab monster from earlier and is like, "I'm not going back inside that mirror, you are," and snatches Jason up with a giant claw. Jason tries to use his hand mirror against the monster, but it does nothing this time and is easily swatted away, so Jason goes for some good old-fashioned violence. He starts punching at the monster's face and eventually grabs onto the buggy eyes and tears them out. This causes the monster to shriek in pain and yellow slime oozes from the eye sockets. Jason then rushes the monster from behind and pushes him into the mirror. Jason's mom wanders into the room just in time to see Jason throw a brass lamp at the mirror, shattering it into little pieces. Claudia appears and quips that a broken mirror is 7 years bad luck, but Jason could give 2 shits at this point. Later that day, Jason wonders whatever became of evil Buzzy and Fred still running around in the real world, but Stein doesn't care to answer this because he's hit his allotted page count. Instead, we get a final page twist. Jason is laying on his bed when suddenly a giant fur-covered snake pops out from one of the jammed dresser drawers from earlier in the story and asks, "Hey, did you get my note?" And that's how this one ends, with another piece of haunted furniture for Jason to deal with. It's not a terrible send-off for the Series 2000 books. Overall, I thought Ghost in the Mirror was a solid addition to the Series 2000 books, especially after a string of books I didn't particularly love. I thought Stein did a nice job moving the story along, while still building up some suspense. I really enjoyed pivoting to full-on monsters versus evil reflections, and I thought Jason's second journey into the mirrored world was pretty imaginative. It does lose some points though for just abandoning the evil Buzzy and Fred storylines, who are presumably still running around in the real world. I'm still gonna give this one 4 out of 5 mirrors. This book easily beat Monster Blood 4 as far as series send-offs go. For the final vomit count, Jason gets really close to puking in this one, but is able to choke it back down. This leaves the final Series 2000 total at 15, which makes my vomit count from the original 62 feel a little more justified since I didn't just imagine it all. Well, that's it for Ghost in the Mirror. I think this one was a fun way to finish up the series, although I did see the next planned title was The Incredible Shrinking 5th Grader, and I would have loved to see what that one had in store. I'm also relieved to see that the final book was actually published in the year 2000, because how sad would it have been if something titled Series 2000 actually never made it to the year 2000? The next couple of weeks, I'll be releasing a best and worst of the Series 2000 books, then I'm going to venture into the Fear Street series with 1989's The New Girl, and I'm excited to see how Stein writes for a slightly older audience. I also plan on doing the occasional Give Yourself Goosebumps book. I just have to figure out how to present something that has like 26 different endings in a coherent way. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Ghost in the Mirror. How did you feel about the monster twist? Were you able to look past evil Fred and Buzzy still running around? Should Stein start a haunted furniture series? Also, what did you think of some of my favorite horror clips? I figured since this was the last book of a series, I could use it as an excuse to feature some of my favorite horror films again. Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,